Here's an experiment for you. Take passionate experts in human resource technology. Invite cross-industry experts from inside and outside HR. Mix in what's happening in people analytics today. Give them the technology to connect. Hit record. Pour their discussions into a beaker. Mix thoroughly. And voila, you get the HR Data Labs podcast, where we explore the impact of data and analytics to your business. We may get passionate and even irreverent, but count on each episode challenging and enhancing your understanding of the way people data can be used to solve real-world problems. Now, here's your host, David Turetsky.
Hello and welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast. I am your host, David Turetsky. Like always, we try and find people who are inside and outside the world of human resources to bring you what's happening in the world that affects you today. I have two phenomenal guests who will talk to us about the absolute latest about what's happening in the world of pay transparency in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I have Representative Brandy Fluker Oakley and Representative Josh Cutler here. Both of you, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you. Pleased to be here.
So before we get into the topic, there are two things we have to cover. First of all, if you want to give 1 or 2 minutes about who you are. And the second thing is something fun. But why don't we first start with Representative Cutler? Tell us 1 or 2 fun things about you.
All right, David. Well, I'll give it a shot. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. My name is Representative Josh Cutler. I'm a state representative in Massachusetts. I represent the 6th Plymouth District, which is towns of Duxbury, Pembroke, Marshall, Hanson, and Halifax. I'm in my 6th term, and I'm currently the chairman of the Joint Committee on Labor and Workforce Development. That's not a fun fact. That's an important fact. But let's say a fun fact would be, I'll give you 2 fun facts. One is I'm a decent juggler, and 2 is I'm an amateur historian. I've written a couple of books.
Oh, cool. Well, you have to give us the links to those so we can have people buy them for you. And Representative Fluker Oakley, how about you?
Thanks for having us, David. So very briefly, my name is Brandy Fluker Oakley. I'm a state representative in Massachusetts. I represent the 12th Suffolk, which includes part of the city of Boston, specifically some towns, including Mattapan, Hyde Park, and Dorchester, and then some of the town of Milton as well. And fun facts about me, I always struggle with this question because I'm like, is that fun? I don't know. But I've been skydiving and bungee cord jumping, and I am a bit of a thrillist. So look forward to adventures ahead.
So the co-host that I have on the program, his name is Dwight Brown. He loves doing exactly that. And I'm sure that he's kicking himself right now for not being on the program to talk to you about his misadventures. I like to call them insurance moments that,
Just for the record, I don't find either one of Brandy's fun facts fun at all. In fact, I find them horrifying. I mean, scary and terrifying. So more power to her, but I could never do that.
No, I can't either. That's why I applaud both of you for juggling as well as for being a thrill
juggling is a lot
seeker.
safer, I think.
Depends on what you're juggling.
That's true.
The topic we have today is near and dear to my heart. I've been talking about pay transparency as well as pay equity for a long time. And for those of you who listen to the HR Data Labs podcast, you know that we talk a lot about it, and we talk a lot about the positives and about the things that make it important for companies to disclose a lot of things about jobs, especially about pay, so that it prevents pay inequities from happening. So today we're going to be talking about what is called HB 1849, which is the legislation that these two phenomenal people have launched, I guess you could say, or sponsored in the Massachusetts House.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking subscribe. This podcast is made possible by Salary.com. Now, back to the show.
So the first question is, what is 1849 and where did it come from? How did you guys sit around and talk about, where is pay transparency and how is it going to affect the Commonwealth of Massachusetts?
Hey, everybody. Got a quick question for you. Is your job easy, stress-free, and full of rainbows and sunshine every single day? Yeah, I'd say that's a big fat no. Hi, I'm David Noe, host of Speakeasy HR, presented by Payroll Partners, and proud to be part of the Work-Defined community. Take a step down into my Speakeasy live on LinkedIn and YouTube, where we tackle HR and business challenges through raw, uncut, unfiltered conversations. This is HR like you've never heard it before. Bold, real, and full of practical takeaways. Real guests, bold insights, authentic conversations that drive change. Catch every episode on demand through your favorite podcast platform or all the content at speakeasyhr.com.
Sure. Well, I'll jump in since I originally filed it, and Brandy can jump in and correct me and make me look good. So it actually, credit goes to a constituent of mine. Her name is Megan Driscoll, and she came to me with this legislation now almost, I think, 4 years ago, as someone who had run a business and was very concerned about pay equity and wage equity. She came to me with this idea, and we filed it as a bill, and we've made progress ever since. But to answer your question, David, I mean, I think it's a pretty simple bill, but I think it accomplishes quite a bit. It basically, the bill is one page. It's just saying that when you are in the hiring process and posting a position for hire, that you disclose the salary range of that position, whether it's whatever the range may be, that's up to you, but that you disclose that range. And that would apply whether it is a new position or whether someone is transferring, maybe being promoted internally, as the case may be. So it's a really simple thing. We think it's quite a powerful thing, though. Studies show that, we know that women and people of color do not earn equal pay for equal work. Right. And studies show that salary negotiations and questions about salary history are one way that this wage gap is perpetuated. And so to solve that and to fight back against that, we bring salary transparency into the process. And that has been shown that is a big equalizer, a way to level the playing field. And so that's really what our bill is all about.
Absolutely. How about you, Brandy? What are your thoughts on the bill?
Yeah, so Josh articulated very well how the bill originated. And I think just from my experiences as a professional trying to climb the ladder in various ways, certainly what my previous pay was often a barrier, or I didn't know what other folks were making. And so while I may have negotiated my salary, it wasn't necessarily to the same level. I often share a story of how I was working a job as an executive director, and I had tried to negotiate my pay. They wouldn't meet me where I wanted to be met, and I was ready to make a change. So I said, you know what, I'll just take the job, then I'll show my worth and hopefully get advocate the performance review cycle for higher salary. And they weren't going to move on the salary, but they were hiring for the same role in a similarly situated city as Boston. And on that job description, because they were working with an outside consultant who knows that publicizing the pay is good for equity in business and in the HR world, I saw the exact salary that I was looking for posted on that job description. So I said, hey, I saw for this position in this city, you're willing to pay this amount. I've pulled the index data on how my city and this city are darn near identical. I would like you to give me this salary. And had it not been publicized, I wouldn't have been able to advocate for myself. And certainly as a woman, as a Black woman at that, I recognize and know firsthand those inequities with pay. Absolutely. And it has to stop somewhere. And I think this bill does a great job of helping to level that playing field. It's
hard not to get emotional about this conversation because there are so many people who cannot advocate for themselves. They don't have either the ability, like they can't lose their job, like they have to support their family, so they can't push things. They don't feel like they're in that position. So one of the things that transparency does is it does empower you. It empowers people to say, hey, this is my career. This is where I want to be. Why can't I find out what that pay is? And I'll just give you a quick story. When I worked for Morgan Stanley back in the early 90s, I did compensation for them. I was part of the compensation department. And as part of that, one of the things that we talked to with the executives is, the water cooler talk about pay. And one of the rules that we had, and this was early 90s, was if you talked about pay, you got fired because we didn't want people to gossip. And it goes obviously towards the, if you know what this other deal was, then you'll want it too. And we now live in the world that was not the age of the internet. Now we live in the age of the internet where a lot of these things are much more obvious and they're more transparent. And one more really funny thing, when that story was happening with that reporter for the Boston news station who interviewed us for that story around pay transparency, he told the story about how one of his students asked him about his pay and he wouldn't tell her in the public setting. Well, I'm the one who disclosed my pay during that story. And that's the only thing he took from that. But and I guess and this is where I'm going to ask you guys as well. I don't feel that pay necessarily is something that defines me. but pay is a way for me to obviously be compensated by the people I work for. But it doesn't define who I am emotionally or mentally. Do you feel that one of the things that people are going to be dealing with is that emotional and that maturity issue about now learning about pay, not only about their pay relative to others, but like you were dealing with, Brandy, and learning about pay and then having to have that maturity that you did, or to have that emotional reaction to it?
Thank you, David. It's a great question. And I think we're fortunate here in Massachusetts, at least, we're kind of building on the shoulders of other people who've gone before us and really done a lot of good work in this space. And back in 2017, we passed a major gender pay equity bill that did some of the things you're talking about, trying to make talking about salary not taboo anymore and prohibit people from being asked questions about that, because we know that can perpetuate wage gaps too. And so this is sort of pay equity 2.0, I think. So I shout out to those who came before us. And I would say, Brandy just gave a really powerful anecdote about her own experiences. And I just want to share one that came to me when this first issue came up. And if people may recall, your listeners, about the debate about the U.S. women's national soccer team going back a couple of years. And we just so happens I represent one of my district. In my district, one of the members of the team is from the district. Cool. And so I'm very, very proud of that. But so we were talking about that. And, the reason we had a sort of a national debate about pay equity and why the women weren't making as much as the men, when they were clearly, number one, they did better than the men.
Exactly.
But why they weren't making as much for the same job. And so we had that national discussion, I think, which was really healthy. And you can come down on that however you want, but we had that discussion. And the reason we were able to do that is because we knew the data. We knew the salary. We had transparency. So we were able to have that conversation. Right. And that was what this is all about, really just putting it out in the open, letting us have the conversation. And people can, form whatever opinions they want. But at least we're all on the level playing field. I think that's what this is really all about.
Do you think that there's this visceral reaction from an emotional perspective about knowing other people's pay and knowing or trying to judge your pay against other people in that way?
I don't know if there's a visceral reaction. I think if the numbers don't line up for similar work, then certainly someone might feel like it's an unjust situation or an unfair situation, and there might be a reaction there. And I think that Josh mentioned the need to level the playing field. I personally think this also helps with recruitment. In former lives, I've been an executive coach. I still do executive coaching. I do management training. I work adjunct basis for a nonprofit that does managerial trainings. And there are tons of great organizations hiring. And then they'll ask me to share the job description. And the first question I ask is, how much does it pay? Exactly. And not because I'm trying to get into the finances of the organization, but if you want me to help you find a quality candidate, I need to know what the salary is, because different people are at different stages in their life. So there might be someone who's newer in their career and can take more of an entry-level salary, and they're happy to do that. There could be someone who might just be returning to the workforce. Maybe they left for caregiving reasons, or they decided to travel the world, and now they're coming back and they're saying to themselves, you know what? I don't need as much of a high salary. I want to have a huge impact. Here's what I'm willing to work for. And I think that the trepidation and fear and the emotion, in my experience, has been more so on the employer side than the employee side, as opposed to just stating what it is and allowing folks to navigate it as best as possible with that information.
Well, we know that public officials, when they get into those jobs, their pay is disclosed, right? I mean, it's there. You can look up what your mayor, your committee members, what they make. And that's been law for a long time, right? And it's not just a Massachusetts thing. That's across the country for the most part. So actually, there was a story about Penn State, their basketball coach, and he went to a new university, and they hired a new basketball coach, and they were talking about the relative value and based on the numbers, which is, to me, exactly what you want. You want to talk about what can someone do and their experience levels. And this was, Brandy, I think this was to your point, when someone's going for that job, do they have the right experience for it? Do they have the right training for it? And are they well suited for it? To me, that's what you're getting when you have pay transparency. You're trying to match your skills, your education, all the things that you're going to bring to the job. And if you don't know what that is while you're interviewing, it's kind of a waste of time to get an offer after you've spent all that time trying to get that job and to realize you're really not qualified because it's not at the level that you were hoping for.
Yeah, I think once again, Brandy made a great point. I'll just echo that. I think one of the reasons why our legislation has attracted a lot of support, including from the business community, is because there's really, I think, a business imperative here that the legislation helps accomplish. And it's pretty simple if you think about it. The hiring process can be costly. Investing personal time in candidates who don't share the same salary expectation is really a waste of company resources as well as a waste of the candidate's time. And so by putting the payout from the beginning and the outset, you're removing that. So you're doing businesses a favor by removing this impediment, something that, in many cases, and you talked about the public sector. So our salaries are public as public officials. And one thing the public sector, I think in Massachusetts has done pretty well that perhaps the business community could learn from is on most positions working for the Commonwealth, the salary range is posted. And that's been a pretty common practice we see for most public positions. Increasingly, you see this on the private sector side as well. What our legislation would do, importantly, is to level the playing field and make everyone abiding by the same rules, which I think is important. So I think there's a business imperative, a business argument here, and also just a basic fairness argument here, which is why I think we feel pretty good about our bill and the prospects of this term.
Hey, are you listening to this and thinking to yourself, man, I wish I could talk to David about this? Well, you're in luck. We have a special offer for listeners of the HR Data Labs podcast, a free half-hour call with me about any of the topics we cover on the podcast or whatever is on your mind. Go to salary.com/HRDL consulting to schedule your free 30-minute call today. So let me go and ask a different question then. A lot of states have passed pay transparency legislation, and the Commonwealth has now put, as you said, a very simple pay transparency law out there. And I guess I'm going to ask a little bit different question than I may have asked before. And that's that, like, California went all the way, right? They asked for reporting requirements. They are looking for contractor pay as well as for employees as well. Ours is relatively simple. In Massachusetts, we're choosing it to be very simple and very straightforward. Was there a reason that we went very simple, or did we look at the California legislation and the New York legislation and say, no, this is what's right for the Commonwealth?
Well, Josh, I was going to say, I know you already touched on this, but in Massachusetts, we've already done a fair amount of work on this particular issue. So we already had it as a law that you can't ask someone what their current previous salary is as a base in order to determine how much you think their worker contribution will be for your company. And so recognizing that we already had a strong foundation, there are some other measures that came out of that bill that we passed several years ago. So recognize we already had a strong foundation. This is really, and Josh put it so perfectly, 2.0. How can we take it to the next level to really continue to ensure transparency? And certainly looked at other states as a model to be informed on what could be possible for this bill, but it's really building upon our already strong existing policy.
Yeah, I think Massachusetts, takes a backseat to nobody, on this issue. And, I would say that to my California friends as well. Just one more note I'd add, there's some other legislation that we're also back in this sort of, I would call companion legislation that has to do with data reporting. Sure. So that's a separate piece of legislation that we purposely kept separate that we're working on as well, because we understand that, this is one piece of the puzzle, but having the data is helpful as well. So I think we certainly recognize that, and we're very proud of where Massachusetts has been and where we're going. All right. Well,
thank you very much for proposing a very simple piece of legislation that people can look at and go, this is good. This is, it's not complicated. It's easy to follow. And that's one of the problems.
Even I can understand this bill, David.
Well, I think you're shortchanging yourself. But seriously though, when I'm dealing with SB 1162 a lot from California, and there's a lot for companies to unpack there. It's I have one employee here, or I have 100 employees here, or I have 10,000 employees here. There's a lot for companies to unpack, and there's a lot of work that they have to do. And so the next question I wanted to ask is, what would you suggest companies do to prepare for pay transparency in the Commonwealth? What do you think that they should do to kind of get themselves ready for it?
Yeah, I'll go first then, Josh. Please feel free to add on. I think there are a couple of things that companies can do to prepare themselves. One is take a look at your salary bands presently. I might encourage folks to proactively do a compensation analysis and see if there are any gaps along gender or race or the type of work that folks are doing that they may think about, okay, how can we make some pay adjustments? Also looking at the market too to see, oh, we set these rates how long ago? Are they still competitive for where we see salaries going, which we all know we're feeling the crunch in our pockets as the cost of things is rising. And I don't think that salaries are rising at the same rate. So I think that's a good first step that companies can do. And then also, we hear this a lot in more of the business world around like design thinking, or we whittle it down really base level, pilot or test it. Maybe just try it out with one geographic location within your organization or one department in your team or organization to get a sense of what it's like, and then make any amendments to see, oh, it's maybe not as scary as we think it is. And what I do think is really fair about the bill proposed by Josh and myself is that it's only for employers who have 15 people or more. So we recognize for smaller organizations, it might be a different need, and there also might not be the same level of administrative capital to be available to implement this. And so really thinking about how folks can do that compensation analysis and also maybe test or pilot it in either a geographic locale or within a division department in the company and see how it goes.
Right. Good advice. Representative Cutler?
Yeah, it's hard to top that, but I would just say, companies, there's nothing preventing companies from doing this today. They can disclose their salary range right now. You can take our bill and start following it now. It doesn't have to become law, and you'd probably be better off anyway, and you'll be ahead of the game. So there you go.
We've been advocating this for years. We're very, I guess you could say we're very pro pay equity. And what we've been trying to do is to try and break down a lot of these barriers, or we've been asking to break down a lot of these barriers. And companies have found that in order to get that push in the back, and I think this bill is a really great push in the back, it gives them the opportunity to say, we've got to do it. We've got to start opening up. Compensation for too long has been done in a box. It's been done in the back room. It's been done by people like me who say, hey, listen, there's a reason why these things are secret. And one of the things that we're advocating is that people start simplifying. And I think this is where you're going, Brandy. Start simplifying your programs. Start making it really easy for people to understand, because not everybody has master's degrees. Not everybody has, a business degree. And in order to be able to make sure that they understand what these pay ranges are, they shouldn't need to know statistics. So, give them an ability to understand this stuff by just making it really simple. At least hopefully companies will do that. We haven't seen that yet. Although as we consult with companies, that's one of the things we advocate for, is make things really simple. And because complexity is not our friend when it comes to transparency.
Yeah, I think the old acronym is KISS, keep it simple, stupid.
Exactly.
Just make it as easy as possible. Least common denominator here. And I think sometimes companies are hesitant because they say to themselves, oh, if I post the whole salary range, right? And let's say that range is anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000, that folks are going to want to come in at the higher range. But then I think that's actually an opportunity to be more transparent as you're going through the interview process with folks to say, hey, this is our salary range. And in fact, we find that folks who are coming into this job with X years of experience, if that's your indicator, though I have some flags on that. So invite me back, David. I can talk about
of course.
why we might not want to use experience as a metric, but we look at experience, we look at what the person can do. And usually people start in at about the 25th percentile or the 30th percentile. The few occasions where someone does come in starting in the 80th or 90th percentile are when they have XYZ. Based on what we see from you, if you were to get this job, likely it would be in this range. So that way you're just being transparent up front, and folks aren't going in eyes wide open thinking, oh, the range is this much, I'm going to be at the top of the range. Just make it very clear what that criteria is. The problem is so many organizations don't have that criteria. And often it's based on, oh, well, this person seems really cool, or I like how they operate. You know what, we really want them, without having those indicators outlined, which then has implications for equity and inclusion. So I think naming those and identifying those and just making it very clear to the candidate as they're moving through the process.
We've been creating things called career frameworks, which show a progression, like an engineer 1, engineer 2, engineer 3, what educational requirements, what experience requirements come along with that, as well as what are the competencies and behavior levels that people need in either way. And if you tie that to the pay, then you're showing someone, here's where we're hiring you. here's, if you get this experience and you get this education or you get these other competencies, here's where you go. So to your point, it actually takes people from where they are and it gives them that roadmap that shows how you can earn more and where does your career take off and what range that puts you in at that point. So instead of worrying about how do I get there, it's about what do I need to do in order to gain those skills, competencies, education, or experience to be able to get to that level.
David, one thing I'll just add, what Brandy was talking about made me think of one of the things in our bill, we've added a good faith provision so that, one of the things we've seen in some other states is the employer will post a range of $10,000 to $100,000, just to give you a silly example, which is meaningless. And so obviously we want to avoid that situation. So we have added a good faith. The employer must disclose in good faith what the salary range is, which we hope will cut down on those types of silly ranges.
Well, you saw the Netflix example, right, where they posted the flight attendant job, and it was from like $60,000 to $380,000 base pay. Yeah. Well, I mean, the other question I wanted to ask is, are there teeth in the bill to then require, whomever to follow up or fine for things like that when they're not exactly following the letter of the law?
There are, yeah, David, there are. And we've tried to keep a fine balance here. This isn't designed to be punitive. This is designed to be helpful. And so we have empowered the Attorney General to enforce this. Okay. There are financial penalties for failure to apply for subsequent efforts. The first violation is just a warning. Sure. Because again, we're not here to penalize businesses. We're trying to help them to comply. And so it's more focused on the education, but there is some teeth to the law that the Attorney General can investigate and find those businesses that willfully and purposefully avoid it.
Well,
and then also, David, just relatedly, there's also protections for employees who do seek to inquire about what the salary range is, whether they just want to know for their own information or if they're going through the process of promotion within the company, then they can also request it and be protected from any retaliation for making the inquiry.
Which is extremely important because we can't have people who are asking the right questions and then getting back hey, you can't ask that, which might happen. We know there are people who are stuck in their ways who shouldn't be. So that's good as well. Let me ask the dumb question. So is there anything else that we didn't cover touching on pay transparency that you're hoping HB 1849 will help us with?
I can't think of anything else. Maybe Brandy can.
No, I took a deep, they can't see me, but I took a deep breath inhale and I was like running through my mind like, no, I think we covered it. So appreciate you, David.
Well, I appreciate you both. Thank you very much. Listen, this is a really complex topic. We tried to cover it in a half an hour. I think you both did a very good job. So thank you very much. I really appreciate you putting 1849 out there, and hopefully the Commonwealth will pass it sooner rather than later. And to your point before, there's no reason why companies can't start being transparent today. Please, we encourage you to do it. It's a good thing and it's the right thing for everyone. Any last words?
Thank you. And if for those listeners out there, tell your state representative to support our legislation. And we have a hearing coming up May 9th. So that'll be the big first step.
So hopefully by that time, this is both passed and it's law, and we're all celebrating it now. But
there you go.
Thank you so much, Representative Brandy Fluker Oakley and Representative Josh Cutler from Massachusetts. We really do appreciate you. And again, thank you very much for putting this out there and for being a part of the HR Data Labs podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care and stay safe.
That was the HR Data Labs podcast. If you liked the episode, please subscribe. And if you know anyone that might like to hear it, please send it their way. Thank you for joining us this week, and stay tuned for our next episode. Stay safe.